Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited to be here once again. My name is Helen Oti. I'm so excited because I was able to get one of our practice directors who really specializes in inventory to join me today. So, Peter, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, my name is Peter Murphy. I am a practice director at Arqiva. Work with a lot of clients over the years, demand, inventory, touching into supply at times, and I'm also very excited to be here.
Thanks, Peter. As usual, I do want to mention a few things before we get started. If you're having trouble hearing us at any point in time, please let us know using the chat feature, and we'll be sure to assist you. Also, we rely a lot on your feedback during these webinars. So at the end of the webinar, if you can take a few minutes to complete our survey, we really appreciate that. Let's get started. We're going to talk today about striking the balance between overstocking and understocking. And I think just gauging from the number of people that have registered for this webinar, this is a topic that's of interest. So I'm very happy that we have Peter with us to talk about this. And as usual, since I have to introduce Arqiva, since I see some new names here, as well as some clients on the call. At Arqiva, we are a full-service supply chain planning solution provider. And one of the core things that's unique about Arqiva is that we focus primarily on supply chain planning, so we don't do anything else except for supply chain planning. And this is a very conscious effort on our part because we believe that improved business performance starts with better planning. So that's the core of everything that we do. And what that really means is that every time that we talk to clients, we're really focused on the challenges that you have within your supply chain, and we provide personalized solutions as a result of that. So we're really talking to you, trying to understand what your supply chain challenges are. We provide solutions that are based on your process, and then we have a technology that really enables that process. So it's really about you, really about your challenges and finding solutions to that. So what do I mean when I talk about technology solutions? If you've attended some of our webinars, you've seen this graphic before. This really shows you the different modules that we have. Our implementation is in a modular approach. So technically, you could essentially implement our demand planning solution and our inventory management solution, and then expand as your business expands or as you grow in maturity. We believe in a one-plan S&OP system, and what that really means is that having a centralized in-memory database that connects everybody within the organization, getting everybody to talk to each other, synchronizing, and creating better supply chain visibility. And so along those lines, we've created a full suite solution that starts with real-time demand planning, optimized inventory management, really creates that balance between demand and supply, which is the core of what we're going to talk about today. And then that all feeds into real-time dashboards. And a core thing that we've been talking about these days, and we've seen a lot of clients really interested in, is that financial integration piece, right? Because you don't want the finance team, creating budgets, and then the operations is doing something different. So we've really looked at the whole S&OP process, and that's what our solution is based on. Obviously, this is a really robust solution. So today we're going to focus more on the inventory part of things. Some of the core features, this is a very detailed solution that we can go over if you're interested in at a later time showing a demo. But some of the core features that I wanted to be able to highlight during this presentation is the robust inventory scenario built-in. And what that means is that you essentially can see the impact of changes across the supply chain, right? So you can say, let's say if my inventory was to increase by 100 or decrease by 100, what does that mean as far as my capacity? Do I have the right things in place? You can see that in real time and build your plan according to that. So there's no more guess games because you can see the impact across the supply chain. And one thing I mentioned earlier was the fact that we have the dashboards that you would need to be able to monitor KPIs in real time. We also have an alerting feature. So let's say if you're understocked, overstocked, you can have all those types of alerts set up within the system, and it's automated. So it really takes away the hard work from you. And I think Peter's going to talk about this a little bit more, but the core thing here is trying to find the best fit inventory method or the stocking policies that you want to have for your business. So that's the core of what's built into the application. And as Peter goes through his presentation, we go through the inventory optimization process that we use. So we really align our technology with the process as well. So what are we going to talk about in more detail today? So let's take a look at our agenda here. So as I've mentioned, and I'm not going to go over this because I mentioned this, we are going to focus on Arqiva's approach to inventory planning. Peter is one of our resident in-house practice directors who really specializes in this field. So he's going to talk about what you should do on the process side, right, and then have that technology behind it that helps with that. And essentially, since I've talked about the visibility piece, I'm not going to focus on that. But one thing to remember here is that your inventory is really tied to your demand planning process. It's something that's really dependent on each other. So he's going to focus on talking about segmentation, how do you segment your products, and create a process where you're servicing your customers in the way that is based on if you have clients that are more important, or if you have products that have a certain high volume, you're going to be looking at all of that to make sure that you have the right stocking policies in place. And that's going to feed into how you calculate your targets. And again, that's going to be the overall strategy that you create. So we're going to talk more detail about that. One thing I forgot to mention is that if at any point in time you think of a question, feel free to let us know using the questions window in GoToWebinar. And we want to make this as interactive as possible, so we'll stop along the way and answer your questions as you think of them. So I'm going to turn this over to Peter, and he's going to start with talking about the Arqiva inventory optimization process.
Okay. Thank you, Helen. Before getting into that, I'd like to describe a real-world situation. And I realize that it's a little contrived, but let's just pretend it's a real world. What we are seeing here is the layout for a ketchup maker. As you can see, over here, on the right-hand side, they have a couple plants, some vendors that supply them tomatoes, salt, vinegar, that sort of thing. They have their own distribution system, warehouses and stores here, and then ultimately over here we have the customers. And on this particular day, things are going really well. The raw materials are coming in just when they should. The plants are picking it up. They're making the ketchup. They're packaging it. They're distributing it to the stores. And consumers are buying it just like they've always done, just like they did the day before, and like they did approximately what they did last year at this time as well. And then stuff happens. And what do I mean by stuff? Well, here we're showing that demand has slowed and the inventory begins to grow because planners just didn't see the issue in time. Maybe you've got the opposite problem. The opposite problem is that demand is a lot higher than expected, and it's forcing production to make some tough decisions. Do they add another shift? If they are at capacity already, do they procure half-made ketchup from somewhere else? Do they build another plant? Tough decisions to make that will cost a lot of capital if you go. Or, well, you've got sourcing problems. Maybe your supply chain is doing just fine, but your vendor is having some problems, and yeah, you're not getting the vinegar in time, and that's affecting your production. Or a machine has gone down, or one of those 6 trucks that you depend on is off on the side of the road with a full in back and the transmission's broken. So this stuff that we're referring to here is called variability. And as planners, we have to account for that, and we have to prepare for it. How do we do this? At Arqiva, we have a successful approach to optimizing inventory that I would like to share. So what do we have? There are 3 main focus areas. If you look on the left, we have inventory analytics, visualization, and policy setting. In the middle, optimization, safety stock, and cycle stock. And on the right-hand side, inventory planning and reporting. Let's take a look at these in a little bit more detail. All right, the starting point is analyzing the existing demand and inventory data to look for patterns. So for instance, segmentation of products by importance. Inventory quality, what can be sold, what is selling, what is not selling. Can you identify product that is obsolete and just taking up space? Ultimately, we want to use this data to inform our policy setting and our reorder policies. The second step is to optimize safety stock, either for one location or across your entire network. What we're showing here, one of the options is single echelon optimization. Down at the bottom, multi-echelon optimization. Single refers just to one node in the network, for instance, a plant or a warehouse, and it's a pretty straightforward calculation. Multi-echelon is it's a lot harder problem, to be frank. You're still trying to serve that customer, that end customer in a specific way, but you're making decisions across the entire network and trying to balance things out. The center box there, central or decentral stocking policies, that's referring to how inventory is organized across the network. Do you ship directly to the customer, to the store, or to a distribution center? So just really quick, I'll just touch on this. This is the ketchup maker that we saw a moment ago. If we're looking at a single echelon, I'm really looking at this. This is just looking at the plant. Let's say the plant builds up a little bit of finished goods inventory before moving on. In a multi-echelon, we're really looking at the whole thing. Okay. Now, if we focus on that third box, this is the one which it's called inventory planning and reporting. This third section is where it all comes together, because here we are actually planning for future time periods. With this kind of tool in place, we can know what to make and when to start it so that it's ready when it's needed. Now, there are different ways in which we can do this depending on the complexity of your production procurement process and the decisions that need to be made. So, for instance, we have something called rough cut capacity planning. Do you need something simple that lets you plan production at a pretty high level, and you can manage your capacities by level loading it as you decide? Do you need something a little bit more programmatic that can handle a larger set of decisions probably at a more granular level of detail. And it's going to use a rule-based approach that's going to mimic the actions of the planners. That's the goal there. And it solves in a defined sequence. So what I mean by that is it's going to look out, say, next month, and it will, the sequencing for satisfying demand might be, well, first the orders, then the safety stock, and then the forecast. And then it'll look at the next month, again, orders, then safety stock, then forecast, etc. Another option we have is an optimization engine, and that can make very similar decisions, but has the flexibility to make smarter decisions for the business as a whole. So it's not locked into that sequence of that I just kind of explained before. This could potentially ask the question, well, I need to build inventory for a future time period. When should I begin that? Or given the capacity constraints, which demand do we meet? There are a lot of other decisions that can make. Optimization engines typically can solve much larger problems as well. So coming back to the original set of 3 focus areas for inventory optimization, we'll just take a pause and realize that this slide covers a lot of information. There are some things in here that are pretty easy to explain and calculate, and there are other things that are pretty complicated projects. And depending on your business and the existing processes you have, there are different areas where you might want to focus. You may already have some way of calculating safety stock. It might be in Arqiva, it might be in another system. And there are some folks probably on the call that may be doing all their planning in Excel. It's a great tool for that up until a certain point. So what I like to think of inventory planning as a process of continuous improvement. There's always something better that can be done. The approach I've laid out here can really help guide the way. Helen.
So Peter, you mentioned something about using Excel and it being okay up to a certain point. When do you really feel like organizations need to think about pivoting to another solution?
Well, the challenges with Excel is that it can be very hard to maintain data integrity. If it's doing a complicated process, for instance, if it's actually managing a significant portion of your business, the number of experts that can actually make changes that would adapt to your changing business, it's probably one person. If it's 2, I would be surprised. And you really need to be cognizant of, what happens if this person leaves? What if they retire? So it's going to get to the point where Excel is just too difficult to maintain, and that's going to be the cue, for any particular business. Okay. All right. Well, let's start with some basics. What do we mean by inventory? Raw materials, component parts, work in process, or the finished products held at a location in the supply chain network. Okay? And our goals for improving inventory management? We build and keep inventory in order to match supply and demand in the most cost-effective way. And this is one of the central points of the discussion today. How do you match demand and inventory data? So we'll be touching on that later. Specifically, reduce inventory carrying costs and other related expenses. Those expenses, they could include obsolescence, breakage, theft. You might gain market share through superior service and product availability. It might be a customer retention issue. You need to improve service levels. The general rule of thumb, by the way, is that it's about 5 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than to nurture an existing one. So there's a lot of value there. Support growth of new channels or geography. Those are some of the goals that I've outlined for improving the process. Now, this really comes down to 2 opposing objectives. We can improve the customer service. We need to improve the customer service, and we need to reduce inventory. Now, how do we do that? I know it's a cliche, but what we are really after is that we want the right inventory at the right place and at the right time. If you have that, then you have balanced things perfectly. And it's, how do we get to that point? That's the real question. From a financial perspective, we can see the benefits. When we get the balance right, our customers are happy and we minimize the lost sales. And by maintaining just enough inventory to satisfy our customers, we minimize the money tied up in inventory. And then we can then use that cash to fund other initiatives. So while the goals are in conflict, it's critical to chase after these 2. Okay. Well, let's take a closer look at some reasons to hold inventory. Now, I'm showing here 5 specific, 5 specific types of inventory. Not every company has a need for each of these, but some do. And even if you do, you may not be holding each of these at any one particular time. Starting from the bottom, strategic stock. We'll be going into a little bit of detail on each of these. In process, in transit stock, anticipation stock, safety stock, and cycle stock. The way that I read this, think of time as the horizontal axis, stock level, the amount of inventory, the amount of product you have is the vertical axis. And you probably recognize that sort of typical sawtooth pattern associated with cycle stock. Okay, so let's start. Strategic stock. Now, this is inventory that falls outside of the normal business cycle, and it's a hedge against extreme events. Strategic stock is stock that is kept for strategic reasons, such as, you look ahead, you see price evolutions, suppliers are going to change. There are potentially, there are big risks, there are big opportunities up ahead. Consider a situation where you have a key supplier, okay? It looks like they're going to go out of business. For some reason, they're not doing so well. You might begin to build stock anticipating this as you begin to negotiate with other suppliers to be able to pick it up. Because you don't know at what point they're going to drop out. You don't know when that agreement is going to come with your next supplier. So that's kind of protecting against a risk. Now, let's flip that around a little bit. Consider an opportunity with the same basic scenario. Let's say that that supplier in question is actually servicing a competitor of yours, not you. You might build stock and try to grow market share. So in case they do go under, perhaps you could take advantage of that. Something to consider. Okay, how is strategic stock planned? Well, the S&OP group process that decides on strategic stocks based on quantified estimations. It basically comes down to how important is the risk and what is the likelihood of it happening. Okay? And, there are statistics involved in this. The probabilities, the importance, it's not, there are basically rules of thumb to try to help guide you in this. This, for instance, might be something you use. Here we're considering something from a scale of -5 to a +5. And positive means, well, a positive thing. So let's say you prepare for the situation. That's this white line across the top. If you prepare for it and the event does occur, well, you hit it out of the park. You got a +4. If it doesn't occur, okay, you lose, maybe, you carry more inventory than you would have intended, but you'll consume it at some point. Now, if you did not prepare and the event occurs, well, you get hit, and now you're at a -4. If you don't take any action and nothing occurs, let's say it's a 0. What we can see here is that there's definitely a pattern. What I'm reading into this is that there are more negatives associated with this event. I think I would prefer to prepare for it. Okay. Now, when I think about strategic stock, I always think the first thing that pops into my head is always the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I know that it's bigger than, well, I guess it's not really bigger than changing vendors. But the fact is that the U.S. has at times depended on this. There's approximately 700 million barrels between Texas and Louisiana on the coast there. So that's what pops into my head always. All right. Let's move one level up. Stock in process. What is it? It's stock that exists because the production or the transportation process, it takes some amount of time. Another common term for this is work in process or WIP. It's not something that we necessarily plan for. It's just kind of a fact of life. But for accounting purposes, there are those that do concern themselves with this. And if you want to take kind of a general, like an average value for the stock in process, you can determine it by the average demand times the process lead time. Okay. Now, this WIP, it's like I said, it's a fact of life. Production takes time, transportation takes time. It's going to become a finished good at some point, and that's when we're really going to be taking it into account. Okay, anticipation stock. What is it? Anticipation stock is a buffer against constrained production. So the classic example is when we do a pre-build of air conditioners in the winter. If anybody has suffered the heat wave recently, you can probably appreciate that. It might also be, let's say, snow shovels in the summer. But the fact is that constrained production exists in many businesses, and it's something to be continuously managed. So how is anticipation stock planned? Well, the master production schedule or the sales and operations planning team decides the buildup of the anticipation stock. So basic idea is to cover the imbalance between the supply and demand, or to, coming out of the other end to make sure that you're able to hit your targets. And one more thing just to add about constrained production is that it's not necessarily a hard constraint, something to keep in mind. It may be that your facilities are operating 1 or 2 shifts a day, maybe 5 days a week. So, I think that would be more a decision for the master production schedule, is to consider, well, let's work some overtime to get this done. Should you pre-build, or should you add shifts overnight or on the weekend? Okay. And one last thing to mention here is that companies, they can also build anticipation stock if they know that their supplier is going to have some kind of problem. So in a way, it's like if you were to coordinate with your supplier, this might not be necessary, but again, it's a hedge. Okay, so let's look at cycle stock. Well, what is cycle stock? The amount of inventory to cover the time lag in between cycles. In other words, this is the product that you are selling on a normal basis as you wait for your inventory to be replenished. The quick estimate for this is that the average cycle stock is equal to the average daily demand cycle divided by 2. Safety stock. Okay, this is where things get a little bit more interesting, I would say. If we read the description of it here, it's the amount of stock that we keep to protect ourselves against uncertainties in demand and supply up to a desired customer service level. I'll harken back to what I kind of kicked things off with today, talking about the ketchup maker, and I was pointing out all the stuff that began to happen. The uncertainties, that's another word for the stuff that happens. If everything just ran without uncertainty, if everything was just like, well, it takes an average of 3 days to arrive, and if that were to happen every single day, planning would be easy. But it's the variability, that's what kicks in. Now, before I leave this page and go to the next one, I just want to emphasize 3 things. Uncertainties in demand and supply, that's 2, and the desired customer service level, that's the 3rd one. All right, so how do you calculate safety stock? I'm going to keep this short, but safety stock equals, there are 3 terms here. K, it's a multiplier, that refers to the service level, and there's some statistics behind this. There's this term. This is related to demand variance. This term. This is related to lead time variance. So safety stock takes all 3 of those things into consideration. Okay, so let's consider this more simplified situation. We have, at the bottom, we have safety stock, we have cycle stock, the triangles on top. And at this time, well, time, again, on the horizon, stock levels are vertical. At this particular time, we are at, say, time 0, which is that very first, give me just a second, this very first vertical line here. And so we're sitting right here, okay? We've just received a shipment, great. And the orders continue to come in. And as the orders come in, well, obviously the inventory decreases. At some point, eventually, we're going to get to the point where we need to replenish again. And when do we do that? We're going to do that at the point here where the amount of inventory that you have left before you hit your safety stock is equal to the average demand over that lead time. All right? I'll give a definition of that later. But that becomes your reorder point. That's your reorder point. Consider it like a horizontal line going across. That's the value that you're aiming for. And at the top there, we've got the target levels. All right? So the target level, the quantity needed to cover demand during the order cycle, and it's equal to the safety stock plus the demand during the order cycle. The reorder point is the quantity at which an order should be triggered. It equals ROP is reorder point. it equals the safety stock up to this level plus the demand during the lead time. Okay? Well, we've talked about customer service level. I've kind of mentioned it quickly a couple times. Here's a simple equation for it. Basically, it's equal to the number of orders shipped complete by the promise date. So another way to think of it, again, simplifying it a little bit, is to say, well, the number of orders that are shipped out of existing inventory divided by the total number of line items ordered. So let's say, for instance, we have, I have to say there's a little mistake here. It should be number of orders shipped divided by the total number of orders. I'll clean that up for posterity. Sorry about that. So let's say, for example, that 10 orders have come in and you were able to ship 9 of them without any hesitation. Then that's 9 out of 10. And if in that case, what we're looking at is about a 90, it's an example of a 90% order fulfillment. Just quick FYI, there are different ways to calculate customer service level. What I had tried to explain just here was kind of orders, total orders being shipped. You could also look at it in a more granular version, how many line items shipped versus how many line items there were. And of course, there can be multiple line items in an order. And that's, my apologies, but that's where the mix-up came in here. The thing is, though, that the order level calculation for customer service level tends to be a little bit of an inflation on safety stock. If you're in a B2B type of environment and you're using that kind of calculation for customer service level, it's worth doing some analysis to see where things are. Okay. So let's take a look at the relationship between inventory and customer service level, CSL. When I'm looking here at the chart, we have, this is shown here, 50, 100, up to 350, in terms of millions of dollars of inventory. Along the horizontal axis, we have 85, 90, 95, and it goes up to 99.9. Everyone, well, I think most people, their first intuition is, well, I want a service level really close to 100. It makes sense, right? You want to be able to service your customers. But the funny thing is about this curve is that it climbs steeper and steeper and steeper as your customer service level goes up. And in fact, it never does touch 100%. You would need an infinite amount of stock to do that. So, key questions that you can ask: how much inventory is needed to support a given customer level, customer service? And what service can we get with a given amount of inventory? All right, so let's pivot just a little bit and look at demand analysis. There's a lot of information that can be gleaned from demand data. Remember, the goal of inventory is to match supply and demand efficiently. One reason why demand information is good is that it can be the basis of predicting what your future supply will be. This is the classic time series forecasting. It's not perfect by any means, but it's better than nothing. And it can also be the basis for a more sophisticated form of of forecasting. The raw data, the second thing I was thinking with regard to demand data, it contains a lot of information. There's a lot of different things that we can parse from it. For instance, which products do you sell the most of? Or at least a lot, right? Most often, to the most customers, most consistently, month after month. What are your steady, very steady products? Which products their sales are rising, they're sinking? If looking at, piecing that together with this inventory picture, what is your days of supply, the turns, or your turn-in index? Some helpful analysis that we're going to be looking at: ABC variability. In today's discussion, not so much the intermittence, but it's the same notion. All right. So we're going to use the analysis to establish inventory targets and policies. So let's begin with ABC analysis. This is probably most of you are familiar with this, but I'll just state quickly the Pareto principle states that 80% of the overall consumption value is based on only 20% of total items. The takeaway here is that demand is not evenly distributed between the items, and the top sellers that you have, those A things, they vastly outperform the B's and the C's. As a company, our focus, the best effort, has to be applied to these items, those A items. And that's the principle of this ABC classification. One point to make: Arqiva, as a company, we recommend that prioritization be scored on counts, sales counts. The point of emphasis here is that we want to align our inventory with the demand so that when the customer comes for it, it's available. Finance has a slightly different perspective. They want to look at the annual sales plus, well, not plus times, the cost of the items. That's fine. Those are a lot of the values that are critical to the money sheets. Is a better word for that. But the emphasis here is really that it's more on the cost side of the balance. Okay, let's look at ABC together with service level. Inventory costs money, so we want to spend it wisely. The highest selling products need to be in stock because the orders are going to be coming in. Not so much for those that are sold infrequently. Now, with our items properly classified, we're assigning them a 95% service level. But one way to think of this, again, you can think of it as, well, 100 orders have come in, and we were able to service 95 of them. The flip side of that is that 5% of the orders for the A's, we are expecting not to be able to service that. And maybe that's okay. Hopefully, you don't lose those customers. Hopefully, you're able to, talk to them, convince them. Maybe they can wait a few days. All right. If they can't, well, that's a different story. I'm going to try to touch on that a little bit. So a natural question that comes up is, what values are we going to use for the customer service levels? And we don't really have a magic formula for this. It's something that you need to really think through. How does your business differentiate itself? Is it great service? Are you low cost? Is your focus on innovation? Where does your business fit into the market? So in that example I just mentioned on the last slide, 5% of the orders from the A products went on back order. But let's say you do some follow-up analysis and you see that most of them, all of them, are actually they're just turning into lost sales. Well, let's, at that point, take a step back and consider increasing your customer service level by a couple percentage points. It's going to cost money, but maybe that's what you need to do to balance that against the loss of anticipated sales. Another thing that we can learn from demand history is variability. So here you might think of it as looking at history, you're expecting, say, 100 units to be sold in some month. And in fact, 20,000 items were sold. That's a hard thing to predict. When you have sales that are behaving that variably, erratically, it's really hard to forecast. I'm sorry. So in terms of variability measurements, we tend to use covariance, some statistic. We can talk about that some other time if you want. And really demand variability it's a look at how inconsistent the order pattern is for a particular item at a location. Okay. I think I probably should speed up a little bit based on the hand waves. Thank you, Helen. All right, 9-cell analysis. We talked about the ABCs. We've talked about the low, medium, high associated with variability. Let's combine those two things and not just have one number for, let's say, ABC. Let's create 9 unique cells. And so within those intersections, we're going to apply what might be a reasonable expectation. If it's an A item and there's very low variability, 98 might be a good number. It's a lot higher than the 95 we mentioned before, but you are really confident that that's going to be sold. You're not going to be sitting on that inventory for a long time. Way on the other side, let's look at C's that don't sell that often, and when they do, it's highly variable. 70. Maybe in your business you don't have any. Maybe you basically just run this down to 0. I guess that would actually be 50, but so yeah. So using this same framework, this 9-cell analysis, there are other things that we can do. Here we're looking at aligning the demand with the inventory. This is just a quick report that came out of Arqiva. What we want really is for the forecast, the numbers that are associated with the forecast. We have the A's, ABCs, we've got the low, mediums, high, and we want the numbers that are in here to be pretty much aligned with the current inventory, not in terms of absolute volume, but in terms of proportion. And if that doesn't quite make sense, consider this. What if you have 1/3 of your inventory is A items, 1/3 is the B items, and 1/3 of your inventory is the C items? You're going to be in a tough spot because it's unlikely that you're going to be able to meet the demand for your A items. And for the C items, they're probably going to sit there for a long time. So you want that balance to be there. Okay, we're getting close. Inventory strategies, we're going to take a look at some of these with, again, a little bit later from the perspective of 9-cell. So what we're seeing here is the big arrow. It's essentially the material flow of, from raw materials all the way to finished goods at a warehouse. At some point in time, we're going to get a trigger. That order is coming in at this point right here, and the trigger is called the Customer Order Decoupling Point, CODP. And at that point where the order comes in, we're receiving the order, we're committing the date, you can see here, invoicing and receiving payment. This is a make-to-stock environment. We've positioned our inventory as close to the customer as we can. The order comes in, and we supply it out of stock, well, from stock. Okay, let's look at an assemble-to-order environment. Here, the customer order decoupling point is coming in significantly earlier in our process. We have semi-finished things, they're not yet packaged. The orders are coming in. This is going to, the benefit of this for us as the supplier is that we are incurring a lot less risk. We don't have a lot of finished goods sitting out there. It's only semi-finished. There's probably, in terms of volume, there's probably a lot less of it. And if it hasn't been specified yet, it's something of a postponement strategy. So there are potentially nice savings there. Last one I'll talk about here is a make-to-order environment. Here, the order is coming in even earlier. We only have raw materials sitting around. Again, it's even more advantageous for the buyer. For the customer, well, they have to know that whatever they're buying, it's not just sitting on the shelf. It's going to take a little while to get there. Okay. With regard to the 9-cell analysis that we've used a couple times before, how can we use this inventory strategy? Well, we can make decisions around this, right? The make to stock, maybe for the A products, looking across that second row there, the A products, maybe they all deserve to be make to stock. Maybe the value there is well, justifies it. Maybe if it's low variability, again, make to stock makes sense. As you move further into the lower right-hand corner, I have MTN. MTN stands for make to negotiate. So I think another common term for that is yield to batch. So if you need to make a batch to supply any of this, let's say a batch size is 100, and the person, some customer comes in and says, I would like 10 of these, and well, presently you don't have any inventory. You can negotiate with that customer, see if they're willing to increase their order to make it worthwhile for you to make it. Okay? All right. Yes.
So, Peter, before we go into the demo, there's a question asking for you to clarify what you mean by sales counts.
Sure. Really just looking at the number of things, the number of specific items that are being sold. So if it is, if it's a retail type of thing, it might be the number of bottles of ketchup. If it is, if it's more of a bulk kind of thing, it might be measured in kilograms or barrels or something of that nature. Okay. All right. So we're going to take a little bit of time to walk through a demo. So really, my focus here is going to be on just showing some of the reporting capabilities within the tool. I recognize that we don't have that much time, and that's fine. I'll talk not too fast. A quick introduction just to Arqiva. I figure some of you are not really aware of the layout. We have a number of different reports and capabilities over on this side. We have different groupings of things in the lower left-hand area. This main page here is where you know, our focus is really going to need to be. I think as I step through, since it's pretty straightforward, I will just move from here. All right, let's see. There we are. Okay, so by the way, I just minimized this area here just so that we had a little bit more space to show. Here, I just want to show some dashboards. We have an inventory dashboard. These are different tabs. You can think of Excel, right? The tabs are along the top. We have an inventory dashboard, 2 others, and then the last 3 are going to be some more table-driven information. What you can see is that these dashboards can contain a lot of information. All right. The inventory overview. You focus on one particular month. You can see exactly what your various positions were. You can filter along these lines, and you should be able to filter. There we go. Sorry, I'm being impatient with my clicking. But you can see how when you click, it responds accordingly. So everything is tied in and related. Yeah, I won't get into details on the specific things here. You can read these. The OTIF, on time, in full. We've talked at some length about customer service levels. What have you been able to ship on time and in full? It's kind of a critical measurement for inventory planning. What you can see here is by month, I'm sorry, not by month, by warehouse, by location, how are you doing? A stock out dashboard. Again, really important, right? If this dashboard is really nice, I think, because it includes reasons for things. If you have the reasons, the details are down here in the chart where you can actually see the specific dollar amount associated with it. Here we can see it by type of reason, essentially, right? Invoice mix-up, unscheduled downtime. These things, again, are, well, they could be clickable and filterable. This one's not. Okay. Real quick, I will just follow up, and then I think there might be a question or two. I showed a little bit earlier, just sort of in a pictorial sort of screen, a 9-cell, which suggested, well, we have these ABCs. You are the things that are have not been sold recently at all. So we have the ABCs, and we have inventories, low, medium, and high. Well, this is the table where we would hold that information and drive solutions, drive a process from that.
This is an expected move by MVC.
Sorry about that. Here we have the inventory position. Again, a wealth of knowledge here. We've got product location pairs. We have the calculated safety stock shown, what that means in days of inventory. Average daily usage is shown, current inventory, days of supply, the max target you're looking for, and that in days. Just a simple report, but easily configured, nothing flashy by any means. The last one I want to show is the immediate action needed report. There's a much larger version of this that I chose to skip for time reasons. These are the ones that you are going to, well, you really should have done something yesterday or the day before. This column here is the demand during the run out. So once you run out, days to run out is shown here. So this top line, 28 days until you run out. The lead time is 72, and that difference amount of time with 832 units per day, you're going to not be able to sell 36,589. So, kind of an important report. Any of these things can be put into an alert, so you don't wait until you have 36,000 units of unsold product. Okay.
So the questions that we have here, we have a question about if you have C-class items that have a long tail of materials, making individual purchase orders for every make-to-order material, it becomes a big task for planners. So how do you avoid that?
Well, the simple answer is to not have so many C-class items, and so that suggests, is it possible to do some kind of rationalization process to get your SKU count down? That's a function of what your industry can tolerate, what your customers will tolerate, if they are flexible, if the type of differentiation on SKUs is related to packaging, let's say, maybe you don't need a 2-kilo bag. Maybe 1 kilo and 10 kilos would be sufficient. So that kind of thought process is typically used to get SKU counts down.
Another question here is, do you have any recommendations on how to perform multi-echelon types of inventory optimization? That's a really broad question, right?
Yeah. Earlier I had said some, what did I say? Some of the things that were illustrated in that, the boxes of what we do are very simple, easy calculations. Well, easy enough for a computer, right? And some of them are fairly hard projects in themselves. Multi-echelon it's a tricky thing because you're trying to satisfy the customer service level at the final node in the tree to the customer, and you want that to be high, but how do you scale your customer service levels, your service levels really, at earlier nodes that takes advantage of the, what's the term, the fact that two different nodes can like essentially share the risk mitigation maybe, and so it's a process. It's a conversation in itself. So be happy to follow up on that one.
Another question here is, are your inventory management tools compatible with SAP?
Yeah, we have an SAP connector that we are using. We can pull information directly from SAP. We can push information directly to SAP. Yeah.
So since we're a little over, a quick wrap up, Peter?
Yep. Let's see. Bear with me.
So while you pull it up, I'll just go through some of the things I noticed through your discussion. There's a likelihood that you may have competing organizational goals depending on where you fall within the organization. So the key element here is to create a data-driven process, whether you're using the ABP analysis, NICEL, so that your key products are properly stocked. And along those lines, when you're setting the right customer service level, you have to take a more holistic approach. I really like that slide that you had with different circles, really talking about, if you're looking at the stocking policy, you have to make sure that you're looking at everything as a whole. So if you're someone that wants to differentiate based on cost or great customer service, then you have to factor that into play as well. So those are some of the things I noted. I know you had some things that you wanted to mention as key takeaways as well.
Well, I think the one thing I wanted to mention was I had suggested earlier that we have a successful, proven, I forget the term, approach to inventory planning. I just wanted to point out a handful of things that we have, I think we have papers on these. One's a distributor, right? Their focus was pretty early in the process, analytics and reporting. In year one, 24% inventory reduction, and both their sales and their customer service level increased. So that was a big, big win for them. Multi-echelon inventory at a specialty chemical company, coincidentally, another 24% decrease. This was specifically on safety stock. The key thing here is that it was valued at $8.5 million. A very good project. And in this case, they maintained their customer service level just as they wanted. Another one, again, focused on chemicals, just a coincidence. Their focus was more on target setting. They also appreciated sort of a daily snapshot of inventory so that they could look at trends in that way. Their reduction of finished goods lowered by over 20%. So these are, in my mind, these are pretty big wins. So I just wanted to share some of those things.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thanks for taking the time to talk about this topic. I know it's a very broad topic. As usual, we're going to have this recording, and we're going to share it once we have it up. And you can feel free to go to our website to check out some of our webinars as well. And you know, it's very difficult to go into detail on a call like this. So if you would like a more detailed demonstration, we can set something like that up. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we've had a lot of fun talking to everyone, and thanks for being really interactive, asking questions. If there was anything that we weren't able to get to in the interest of time, feel free to email me at any point in time or reach out to anybody at Arqiva. We'll be happy to help. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.